Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up.
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands.
Where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands.
upcoming tours,
And show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
Week of February 27th, 2023.
Welcome back. We are quickly leaving February into March, and with that, we get what? March winds?
That's what they say. I don't know, it's windy today, so I guess we're just getting a preview.
All right, cleaning the rest of the leaves off the tree there. We have the top 3 stories of the week coming up.
And we have our interview with Mark Samuels from Basin Street Records.
But first, Amanda, did you get a chance to see any live streams this weekend? I know I was checking Fish out.
This has not been the best weekend for me to catch a lot of live streams, but I did watch a good amount of the New Monsoon 25th anniversary live stream from Sweetwater Music Hall out in California, and that was a really special show. That was on Saturday night.
So they're not really the New Monsoon anymore.
No, they're definitely the well-established Monsoon. That's a really good point, actually. I should bring that up with them.
So any guest, or was it just a standard show career retrospective thing, or?
So I mean, they busted out a couple new songs, which even in the live stream chat, the OGs there were like, "What is this?" That's always kind of fun. They brought back some of the original members because New Monsoon started out, if I am remembering correctly, as a 7-piece, and then just over the course of time, changed the lineup. But they had some friends of the band, and then just some of the original members come back. But I got to tell you, Phil and Bo and Jeff, those guys just sound really good. And I know that they're working on some tour dates too. So for people who are fans of theirs, and I used to see them a lot when I lived in California, is really nice to see that kind of like energy that they've got.
We'd love to talk to you, New Monsoon guys.
I think we're going to do it. Let's make it happen.
Very good. So yeah, I was watching Fish. I do this show on What Plus, the After Fish After Show, which you've been on a few times. So I thought last night was kind of the weakest. I really feel like the first night, the one set show, they nailed it. I don't know if it's me being old, but the Dick's one set show last year and this one set show in Mexico, I'm like, I can do a one set show now.
That is so interesting. Yeah, no, and I feel like, well, I guess, Kevin, let me ask you this. So these one set shows that you referenced, do you look at those differently than a festival set?
Yes, because they're usually going to be 2 hours, 30 minutes, where a normal show with the encore is 245, 250, if you're lucky, 3. So it really isn't that much shorter. Mm-hmm. And, the festival sets, I think you think differently with a festival set. You're like, all right, we have 7 songs in an hour to play, or an hour and 10 minutes. It's like you're doing a first set or a second set only, I guess. Whereas the one set show usually incorporates us, close to the same amount of time.
Yeah, good point. And I think that actually might be an interesting question that I would like to get some opinions from out there. So that might be one of our next questions to our listeners, is how they feel about it. I think you make a good point, and I haven't thought about it before, that one really solid, lengthy set can do a lot. Like you can get a lot accomplished in that one set.
Yeah, and you can have fun in different ways. Open with Mike's, close the set with Weekapaw, open with Tweezer or something, or even like a Disease. Was something I found interesting in Mexico. Let me just throw this out there before we get into the top 3 stories. Chalk Dust and Down with Disease. I feel like in 4.0 we're finished every time. And both of these ones in Mexico this year were unfinished. They went back to the 3.0 model of just not, leaving it open-ended, which I found interesting. Now, someone hopefully is going to say, oh, wait a minute, they didn't finish Disease somewhere. But I think that it's the standard, the first 2 years of 4.0 were to finish a song. And I'm wondering if they've abandoned that now for this year.
I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see because, things do trend And if that's something that they're playing with, I'd be curious to see what other songs they would potentially do that with. So definitely something I think to watch out for.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll check. Like everything right falls into mind. Carini. They ended Carini a few times, which I thought was just weird. So maybe
Yeah.
they go back to not ending Carini too. Anyway, let's get into your
The top 3 stories of the week.
All right, Kevin, I've got, as always, scouring the internet all week to try to get these stories for us. And I'll start with the one that I think is the most meaningful. And this is from Rolling Stone. For a while there, Rolling Stone had worked with David Crosby for his Ask Cros advice column, basically, that he published. I don't know if you'd ever seen that one. But Rolling Stone just this last week shared some new advice from David Crosby, of course, who recently passed away, and they pulled it from the final session that they had with him, which took place in the summer of 21. So not that it's new advice, but it's the last bit that they're ever going to get from him. And he offered advice on talking to his teenage daughters, finding love again after, a spouse dies. There was some pretty heavy stuff in there. And he even tried to set the record straight about his former group. So I thought I would just mention this, and then maybe we can share the link so people can go on and read for themselves from the free version of the article, so they don't have to be a subscriber. So he was asked to settle the argument, who's better, CSN or CSNY, right? Which one? And Crosby would not definitively say whether the group was better with Neil Young, which I had thought he would, but he said, I don't think better really applies. They were two completely different bands. Chemistries, it's all delicate, complex. And he said the chemistry between the three of us in Crosby, Stills, and Nash was organic. It came there of his own will. So I don't know if that implies that was not the same when Neil Young was there. Do you have any thoughts on that? You know so much about music history.
I think that he said the right answer. That is what I would expect him to say, is that Crosby, Stills, and Nash was the better band. With Neil Young, it was another joker in the deck, and it was, we have to do a Neil song if we're going to do a Stephen Stills song. And, it became that kind of thing where without Neil Young, Stephen Stills was the de facto leader and driving force, I think, behind Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So, I guess I agree with him on that. The thing about his wife, his first girlfriend, someone you love, dying. Have you ever heard that story about?
I went to look it up because I really didn't know that much about it. So I tried to find some info. What do you have on that?
There's a book called The Book of the Dead, Volume 2 by Hank Harrison, who is Courtney Love's dad. And there's a chapter in it called King David, and it's talking about his girlfriend at the time taking one of their cats to the vet. The cat freaked out and jumped on her head, and she wrecked the van and died. And it took him a long time from what this thing Hank Harrison wrote to recover from that. And a lot of maybe the bad roads he went down later stemmed from that.
Right. Was that what had happened in the 60s? I mean, that was a long time ago, right?
Yeah, that was in the 60s, yeah.
Yeah, the car accident. It definitely was obvious he was so devastated by that, and people do a lot of different things to try to, not feel that pain. So I thought that was really interesting you brought that up.
Right. He ended up with whatever the woman he was through the crack years in the 80s, when he was selling like the paintings off his walls and being chased by the cops on his rims and stuff. I think that when he went to jail, they split up. And the woman he had children with, the teenage daughters you were talking about, was a third or another person down the line.
Yeah.
Right. He has his one son that he came across that he never knew. I mean, there's so much there, my God. If you've never read the David Crosby biography that he wrote, autobiography, check it out. It's got some crazy stories, to say the least.
Yeah. No, he's between the Melissa Etheridge stuff. Yeah, there's a lot. So I guess that could probably fill this whole show.
Right. He was a donor. Yeah. I forgot about that.
But even that, there was just tragedy there too with Beckett, the son, and everything. So yeah, I think maybe that's why I was drawn to this story this week, because it was kind of such a small write-up, but there's so much embedded in anything that I think Crosby ever shared with Rolling Stone. A lot of history there.
Fantastic. I'll have to look for,
yeah.
maybe they'll put them all together as a book or something.
That would
Advice
make
from
it
Cross.
an incredible. Yeah, I would love to have something like that. All right, well,
Coffee table book.
anything can be a coffee table book.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, I thought that was just an important one to start with. The next is yet another follow-up in what I feel like is officially now a saga of this Bruce Springsteen ticketing situation. And it hurts me, but it also is a reminder that no one, no matter what kind of, worldwide icon you are, no one is safe from just the current situation we live in regarding ticketing and all of the live music stuff. So we have very recently, about, Bruce Springsteen's fanzine kind of being scrapped after decades because of just different feelings among these, $5,000 tickets that were being sold to this tour that's currently happening. However, I wanted to mention, I had read that tickets to the February 21st concert that was in Oklahoma, they went to less than $10 each, some for $6, including fees, in the days leading up to that show.
Now, is this on Ticketmaster resale or StubHub kind of sites, or was this directly from Ticketmaster?
So my understanding is that this was Ticketmaster.
Oh, so they dropped them that low. I was thinking that if it was on the second, like the Ticketmaster resale thing, all the scalpers got screwed, which I was like, I mean, I don't care if Ticketmaster gets screwed either, really, but it was just, I've seen that happen before. You can't sell the tickets, but $6, including the fees.
Yeah. So they had bottomed out around $70, which if we remember, they had reached $5,000 based on demand, right? Then they bottomed out to around 70 with fees, and apparently only remained that high for a while due to some price floor. And then also sites without those minimums like StubHub had, tickets available for basically nothing, which I'm going to just say, I was a recipient of a ticket in that kind of situation. The only time I saw U2 at FedEx in Maryland, this was years ago. I waited outside, all my friends were inside, and I refused to buy a ticket that was more than, I don't know, $50, $60. So they went down. But the fact that this happened in the days leading up to the show, not just the day of the show, I think, it says a lot.
All right, now you said something about 70 was the floor, which I find interesting if that language is in there, is that's what they would have to sell the tickets for to break even. Every seat in the place for 70. Mm-hmm. So you can estimate the profit, so to speak, about how much they're making per ticket if it's a $4,000 or $5,000 ticket, and they only needed 70 to cover their costs.
That's right. I mean, and so just like math nerding for a second, the ticket price dropped by a factor of 1,000 after all those other people were kind of forced, in a sense, to pay so much more. I think that definitely bodes very well for all of us music fans, in a sense. Maybe patience pays off. I don't know.
Since the courts aren't helping us, as we went into last week.
Right. So we may see more stories like this. I hate that it was the boss, but you know what? If anybody could maybe understand that, I would hope, considering how he's always positioned himself, maybe he would be the one to use this in a certain way. We'll see. So that was the second story. I literally had to look at the headline 3 times before I said, okay, it really says $6.
Is this The Onion?
That's what I thought. I was like, wait, Live for Live Music or Hard Times? Which one is it? Could have been either. So that's our second story. And the third is just for fun, Kev, just with Phish on my mind, even though, like I said, I know I haven't really been able to see too much. There was an incredibly funny video, like a 20-second video that I saw posted on Phish Twitter. I guess we're calling it Split Open and Symbol. But the video is of Fishman just doing his thing during Split Open and Melt, and right on cue taps the cymbal, and the whole thing just falls off onto the drum, onto the floor, and he doesn't miss a second of what he's doing. But I must have watched the video like 3 times. So I guess the news and all of that is that things happen even to our friends in Fish that you can't always prepare for. And, when stuff like that goes wrong, you would never have known it if somehow that video did not exist and get
Right.
out there.
The camera hadn't have caught that. You got to watch out. A cymbal will take off a limb. Those things are metal and sharp and heavy.
I know, and I didn't even see him flinch. So I'm assuming that this may have happened at some point in the past. It would only make sense that
Right.
that's not the first time, but the man is a pro. Let me just tell you. So we'll make sure that we retweet that video. There's some really great comments. People have
May-
renamed the song.
Maybe that's why Trey's going around interviewing all the crew in Mexico, because they're going to be making some cuts to find out who's up
Well, that's
pulling their weight.
Somebody was like, okay, unfortunately, they know exactly who was supposed to tighten.
Right. Whose
Well,
job
that's-
it was.
I mean,
Tighten
I
that
guess
wing nut.
it was the end of set 1, maybe all bets are off. I have no idea.
Very good. All right. Basin Street Records, if you don't know who Basin Street Records is out there, they are a New Orleans-centric label who have some of the best artists in the country on there now, or have been on there. Bunch of Grammy nods, actually won some Grammys. So we're going to check out this interview. The first thing we got into was the start of the label with Kermit Ruffins, the first live album they put out, and how things developed from there. So let's take a listen and check it on the other side. You began this whole thing with Kermit Ruffins, an album of his?
Yes, I did. I was initially Kermit Ruffin's manager at the time, and for a long time, Tom Thompson approached me to invest in a Kermit Ruffins album. He had just gotten done with 3 records on Justice Records and wanted to do a live record at Tipitina's. And rather than just invest in an album, we started a record label together.
Brilliant. So you start the record label, and that first album was a live album?
It was live. It was recorded live at Tipitina's in November 1997. We set up the label in September that year. The project was initially entitled Swinging Live. That was the working title. And we had a packed house and recorded basically the same album in back-to-back sets, and picked the best songs, the best song from whichever set it was. And most of it all ended up from that first set that night. And it was a wonderful night. Lots of apprehension from the standpoint of recording a live album and making sure, hey, you're worried about things like rain, and
Right.
you're worried about, is it going to be a good crowd? And we had everything went our way. It was a packed house and a great crowd, enthusiastic, and the record came off super. And we released it in February 1998. Again, a lot. We did another show at Tipitina's to celebrate the release of the album, and another packed house. So we were off to a great start. But when we did it, it was really a hobby for me. I was in the energy business. I was purifying natural gas, removing hydrogen sulfide from natural gas. And there was a lot of success early on with the label.
Right.
So Kevin, I'm trying to put myself in this particular kind of situation. New Orleans, starting this label, things are taking a while. Do you think you would have stuck with it?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the Kermit thing was enough to say that there's potential here, but it does raise a lot of questions. Where's my next album? Who's my next person? How am I going to expand this and keep this going?
I don't know if I could do it, but that's why I'm not in this business, and that's why they're still around, after all these years. That's for sure.
He told me that he had a storage unit that he paid whatever for a month that was stacked floor to ceiling with CDs and records and stuff, and the physical media just doesn't move like that,
No, Definitely not. Well, so what else did we get into? I know that you had such a great conversation with him.
Yeah, the next clip we have is DeVell Crawford, who is a piano player, singer in New Orleans, and he was telling me about the first album after he signed him. He gave the guy kind of free reign. Took him a year to make the album. Had 59 musicians on there. Dr. John, he goes into a list of them. So let's check this out, and we'll see you on the other side. I love it. I love that stuff. All right, the third keyboard player I'm going to throw at you is DeVell.
Yes.
Who is a fantastic voice on top of fantastic chops there. You want to talk a little about him?
Yeah, well, DeVell, again, there's a lot of the guys on the label who I had conversations with, or I would go see regularly. DeVell was one of those guys. Henry was one of those guys that I would go see with my late wife and wait for those guys to take the stage. They were both had a kind of a reputation for coming on a little late. And so there were many nights I'd go see him, and there were some nights where he would be like, we ought to do something together, Mark. We ought to do something together. And then one day we finally got around to doing something together. And that first record that we did with DeVell is called My Gift to You. And I think we have something like 59 musicians on that.
Wow.
It took us a year and a half. It took us a year and a half to do that album. And because I don't know, it's just kind of the way I allow people to do their some projects.
He was fulfilling his vision there. Huh?
Yeah. And I just, if you give them, all of these guys, I think, if you give them the opportunity to provide you what they believe is perfection, they will keep working and working and working. And I don't know.
Perfection isn't always achievable, though.
No, it's not. And but he really did make a great album. So many great special guests on that, including the late Walter Wolfman.
Oh, right. Walter just passed. God bless.
He just passed. And Walter's on Jungle Partner on that DeVell record. But we have, I don't know.
You let people go long enough, you end up in like a Steely Dan Gaucho sinkhole, though.
Yeah, it's there was a record. He said, I want to bring Dr. John in. I want to bring Big Frida in. And so we have one track on that album called White Drawers. What's it called? White Drawers. Oh, the River / White Socks and Drawers.
Okay,
I think is the name of the full song. So it's a medley, and that's got Big Frida, Big Chief Donald Harrison, Dr. John, and DeVell all in the same tracks, all in the same record. So that's kind of typical for the songs on that album. Just one great artist after another in a big way.
And what was the name of the album?
That's called My Gift to You.
My Gift to You. Cool.
But he followed that up with a Piano in the Vaults, which was solo piano. Another one that was a tribute to Fats Domino.
Nice.
That's also a solo album. He's got some great music out there for us.
Fats Domino, just so underappreciated. I bet if you asked like the Beatles and Elvis and any of those early rock and roll bands who rock and roll was, they would have said Fats Domino.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you can find recordings of those guys saying exactly that. Yeah.
We're going to get into the last clip here in a second, but before we do that, always want to remind everyone that we are on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at All That Jam Pod, online at www.allthatjampod.com. We have been so grateful recently, Kevin, for all of the downloads and everybody that's been listening. So want to remind everyone to like, follow, share, and definitely leave reviews. So do that. That'll help us out big time. And let's wrap up the interview today. I know that you all had a good conversation about where the industry is today. What were some of the things that jumped out to you about that part of the conversation?
Just the fact that there's no, money for promotion or anything like that. And the limited number, instead of printing 1,000 albums, you only print 500, even though it might cost a little more, kind of thing. We could have gone on a lot further, but we had issues, and I ended up having to record on Zoom. So I had my 45 minutes that was free or whatever. So
Right.
hopefully we'll get him back on to talk some more about it. But yeah, let's check this out. I hear you with that. Yeah, I get. I love Teresa,
Yeah.
but let's get into just a little bit of that because we've hit so many of the artists. What are your challenges? Like, I guess you probably don't view something like Spotify favorably, but what are the answers in order to people don't buy physical products anymore? How do you
Well,
control the stream?
Yeah, let me address that. But I do want to say something about Teresa, if I can.
Sure,
Teresa, because I want your listeners to check out Teresa's latest projects. Teresa has not recorded for us in a bit. She did several records, and they're all terrific. But what she's been working on most recently is an amazing animation of film process for animation. And a year ago, the NFL invited her and her husband, Arthur Mintz, to put together a 2-minute feature for the NFL that was run during halftime of the Super Bowl. And
Wow.
if you Google all that, the
It'll
NFL,
come up.
it'll come up. But it's just this amazing animation technique that they developed. Her husband was very much into large scale puppetry, and they turned that love into something big. And they're working on feature films now, and it's pretty cool. So although I miss her recording and performing regularly, she's doing some cool
Right.
stuff.
Well, and feature films, to go back to the question, is a great way to make money. Sync licensing, things
Yes.
like that. Is that the answer?
I think that's part of the answer. I mean, there's always that possibility. Look, even with Teresa, 2 years ago, I believe I got a call from, asking if we would license a track for $17,000 to a German film, a Teresa song to a German film. Now, it just came out of the blue. There's always that potential when you record good music that someone's going to want it for something, but I can't bank on it. I can't schedule next year's projects based on what I might get from sync licensing. And you mentioned like the whole process of music these days. It's tough. The streaming is like a black box. I never know. First of all, if I went to the Spotify offices or the Apple Music offices, I would not be able to see what it was that we did. It's just like there's no auditing or verifying, certainly from a small label standpoint, what's going on. I accept what we get paid, and I say thank you very much. And it's unfortunate, but that's all I can do. And it might be a couple thousand, it might be a few thousand, it might be several $1,000s a month, but it's not tens of thousands, and it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I can't, there's no rhyme or reason sometimes why I'm getting a certain amount. So that's tough. The process of making vinyl it's really nice to see a resurgence in vinyl, but those projects are expensive. The delivery times are ridiculously slow in most cases, 8 to 10 months delivery. So you're putting up thousands of dollars to make vinyl, and it could take 8 to 10 months to get it. So that's tough cash flow wise.
That's a big gamble.
Yeah, and it's look, our next project slated for vinyl is going to be John Cleary's 21-year-old album, which has never been on vinyl.
Okay.
And I know I can make 1,000 units of that and sell 1,000 units. Will I sell 1,000 in a year or 2 years? One or the other.
Right.
But and I'll probably get into a second and third printing on something like that. But I'm not gonna process. Even though it'll save us money per unit, I'm not going to make 3,000 units right off the bat.
Because in 6 years, you don't want to be sitting on 500.
No, and I've learned that over the years. Well, one of the things about being in business for 25 years is I have a 2,000. 20 times 10. I have a 200 square foot self-storage facility that costs $200 a month, about 10 blocks away from me, and that's full, and it's full to the ceiling.
Right.
of CDs and books and posters, and it's and I don't want to buy that extra 1,000 anymore, or the extra 5,000. That sounds like a really good deal at the time. Hey, the first
But
1,000 CDs
right,
is
what you aren't counting in though is the storage. I learned this selling plumbing parts. The longer you hold on to something, the less it's worth.
right. No, it's $200 a month. I don't think since, I don't know, the last 2 years, 3 years, I think I've probably pulled 100 CDs out of that self-storage facility.
So it isn't even paying for itself.
Yeah, so that's tough,
Right.
and so the whole industry is really difficult to gauge. My most recent artist I have to apologize to all three of my most recent artists actually regularly. It's like I have a young artist named Soraya. I have a young artist who's Kevin in the Blues Groovers, Kevin Gullidge. He was
Right.
an American Idol showstopper. He made it to the final 59 in the last season of American Idol. He, while we were negotiating, he got an audition and told me he was going to do one, and I said, "Great." But we were talking for like a year and a half, because my process with artists these days is really to discourage them from signing with me and to be sure that they understand
What's
that
going to happen?
we're not going to be like putting out, spending tens of thousands of dollars on promotion right off the bat to try to blow up a new artist. That's just not how it's not a practical way to try to develop an artist. So we try to tell them what we aren't going to do. And then after that process, if they still believe in us, then we're going to do our best. So that's what we've done with the last three. And so there's Kevin, and then there's Lena Prima, Louis Prima's daughter,
Right.
who performs at the Monteleone Hotel every Thursday and Saturday. Lena is thrilled to be on our label, but I'm sorry that we haven't been able to move more product for her.
Right. So something like Jazz Fest and French Quarter Fest are bread and butter for you, kind of, to get stuff out there.
It's a great opportunity to expose our artists to a lot of people around the world who are coming to us instead of them having to tour to get there.
Right.
So they get seen by a lot of talent buyers. They get seen by a lot of fans. And although we still sell some music at the fairgrounds, and we certainly have opportunities to sell music in the retail stores, the great ones around New Orleans, like Louisiana Music Factory and Peaches and Euclid and Nola Mix, and there's several other good record stores in the city. It's not like it used to be, where the sales at the fairgrounds would result in a check to us of several $1,000s at the end of 7 days worth of Jazz Fest, or where we would also have these big checks that came in from these record stores because we would do in-store performances.
Right.
It's not like that at all. It's even at the fairgrounds, it's the footprint for their record store at the fairgrounds is very small, and it's just it's not what it used to be. But hundreds of we have last year, I think, at the French Quarter Fest in what it was 4 days, there were like 700,000 people in those 4 days, and then you've got Jazz Fest bringing in 60,000 people a day,
right,
to the fairgrounds for its 7 days. French Quarter Fest is actually more attendance it's a free festival that's
right,
more attended. But COVID and some travel restrictions and things like that really kind of put a damper on the European audience that would come for French Quarter Fest and to Jazz Fest. But that was always French Quarter Fest was always a good crowd for, like, we could sell, Michael White could perform at the French Quarter Fest, or we could sell $3,000 worth of CDs after a show years ago.
Wow.
So, so that's usually a good shot in the arm. I just can't say that the last couple of years have been what it used to be.
Right.
But as far as from a fan standpoint, it's every bit of what it used to be. It's still an amazing thing to be at both of those festivals.
Right. Yeah, it's so crazy. Like you said, would you want to do it? I think the question would be, back then I would want to started it and I would have stuck with it. Now I might question whether it
That's
was worth continuing.
right. Because you got to think, Basin Street not only has shared the success of its artists, but they've won their own awards. I mean, how many was it? 11 times they've won Offbeat's Best of the Beat Award for Best Record Label.
Yeah.
I know they were named Music Business of the Year, several times. So they have proven over and over again, just as an entity, how much they are connected, to that New Orleans jazz, blues, funk, R&B. So great conversation. I definitely think this would make an awesome part 2 as well.
Yes, and there are other clips. As you know, we've been doing a bunch of shorts. So this week, just make sure you're paying attention tomorrow. We spoke with Nick McDaniels from Big Something, and they've replaced their bass player and are going out on tour, I think, starting at the end of next week. His name is Matt Laird, and Nick talked a little bit about that, gave us some of the dates. Wednesday through Friday this week, we're trying something called the Up and Coming series. And we're going to have Disco on Wednesday, Oregon Fairchild on Thursday, and Connives on Friday, which are all not necessarily new bands, but bands that haven't been together that long and don't really have the name recognition. But you're going to see all of them popping up at festivals this summer. So we want you to be ready for that.
I love that. And you know what? Every time we have those conversations, it opens up the door for me to a lot of great music. So really excited that we can share that.
Yeah. All right. So next week, we probably are going to have a little audience participation. Our interview next week will be with another new band called Sponge. And I believe that next Monday is our 50th episode already. So we may be
Wow.
wearing party hats. We'll have to see how that goes.
I like it. Find some special sound effects for us.
Or something. Yes, exactly. And thank you so much for listening. Like Amanda said, find us on social media, like, subscribe, follow the podcast. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. I'll see you soon, Amanda.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.